pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get started this evening, Mr. Campbell, would you mind giving the callers some information on these callers?
Yes, ma'am, I'd be delighted to do that. The call-in number for the public hearing for the citizen comment period this evening is 844-844-9200. Once again, that's 844-844-9200. At that point, the caller will be prompted to enter the access code for the meeting, which is 398145#. 398145#. You'll hear another prompt then that says the Q&A session is started. At that point, please press *6. You will hear, if you'd like to speak, please press 1 to be added to the queue, at which time you should press 1. While you're in the queue, you will hear the audio feed for the meeting. Wait until you are prompted by the moderator and share your comments with the council. During the meeting this evening, we respectfully ask that our attendees here in person continue to observe the CDC and DDH guidelines with respect to masking and social distancing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ham. Item 2 is the adoption of the meeting agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the meeting agenda as presented?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Hostetter. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Announce the motion passes 4-0. Item 3 is consideration of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 4-0. Item 4 is matters from the Vice Mayor. First and foremost, I'd like to welcome all of you for attending tonight. It is the first meeting we've had in a while. Mayor Henderson is out of town tonight on business, and tonight we also will have 2 proclamations and a recognition being presented by council. Is there anyone here to accept the proclamation for child abuse prevention? Would you like to come forward? Thank you. Whereas preventing child abuse and neglect is a solution that requires involvement among people throughout the community, and whereas child maltreatment occurs when people find themselves in stressful situations without community resources and don't know how to cope, and whereas in 2020 there were 144 valid reports of child abuse or neglect in Waynesboro City, and there are 33 Waynesboro City children currently in foster care. And whereas the majority of child abuse cases stem from situations and conditions that are preventable in an engaged and supportive community. And whereas all citizens should become involved supporting families and raising their children in a safe, nurturing environment. And whereas effective child abuse programs succeed because of partnerships created among the Department of Social Services, the Children's Advocacy Center, the Office on Youth, schools, faith communities, civic organizations, law enforcement agencies, and the business community. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by Waynesboro City Council that April 2021 is hereby designated as Child Abuse Prevention Month. Thank you.
Good evening. I would first like to take this time to express our thanks and gratitude for again being able to recognize April as Child Abuse Prevention Month. Having the support of our council can only continue to raise awareness and safety for our local children. If you look at the sheets that were presented to you, you will find both sides with statistics of abuse, neglect, homelessness, and even school dropouts throughout the state of Virginia. You will also find a graph that explains who makes the majority of reporting for our children who find themselves in some type of negative situation. Our educators are the main help in bringing those situations forward. What I would like to focus on for just a moment is the side of the clock that has the clock on it. I would like to share the number of children or families our local agencies have been able to provide services for, even in the difficult time of dealing with the global pandemic. So for the year of 2020, the Child Advocacy Center provided services to 235 children. CASA volunteers provided support to 112 children. The Office on Youth provided parenting support to 189 parents. The Department of Social Services shared that because of better prevention policies and family placements instead of foster care, referrals have now decreased. Evidence shows that children's early experiences impact them throughout life, positively and negatively. Children raised in safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments are more likely to enjoy good physical and mental health and succeed academically and socially. Children who grow up happy and healthy also go on to contribute to economic prosperity for everyone. According to the National Center of Substance Abuse and Child Welfare, evidence-based family-centered services can strengthen parenting capacities and help improve the safety, permanency, well-being, and recovery outcomes for children and families. These prevention services include community-based programs that engage children and families like those offered through the YMCA, Parks and Recreations, local libraries, Boys and Girls Club, and the Office on Youth. Thank you for supporting the collaboration between these agencies and systems who serve families, as it is critically important to achieve positive outcomes for the children and families served. You may also notice throughout the city that there are in the elementary schools, the libraries, government buildings, a small pinwheel garden. Pinwheels are the national symbol for child abuse prevention. They symbolize a happy, healthy childhood. These gardens can help remind ourselves and the community about our commitment to prevent child abuse. One other thing is the Valley Children's Advocacy Center is hosting our first Save Jane event Saturday, April 24th, 2021 at Gypsy Hill Park Bandstand beginning at 12 p.m. During this incredibly impactful event for over 6 hours, volunteers from around Stanton, Augusta County, and Waynesboro will continuously read the names and ages of the 3,121 children who were reported abused in the Stanton, Augusta, Waynesboro area. Because these children are minors and their identities must be protected, Jane Doe and John Doe will be used in place of their names. We hope that through the Save the Jane event, our community will recognize the absolute magnitude and prevalence of child abuse in our community, as it knows no bounds. Again, we thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Next, there will be a proclamation presented by Dr. Hostetter. Is there anyone here to accept the National Public Safety Telecommunications?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. So I'm happy to read your proclamation. Whereas across the nation in times of intense personal crisis and community-wide disasters, the first access point for those seeking all types of emergency assistance and homeland security information is the 911 Center. And whereas the Waynesboro Department of Emergency Management, Emergency Communications Center staff receives these calls and have emerged as the first and single point of contact for persons seeking immediate assistance. and are expected to multitask under stressful emergency conditions with compassion, accuracy, and professionalism throughout the year. And whereas this week, celebrated annually, honors the thousands of men and women who respond to emergency calls, dispatch emergency professionals and equipment, and render life-saving assistance to the citizens, residents, and visitors of Waynesboro and throughout the country. Therefore, the Vice Mayor, on behalf of the City Council and the City of Waynesboro, hereby proclaims April 11th through 17th, 2021 as National Public Safety Telecommunications Week. In Waynesboro, and congratulate the dedicated and hardworking members of the Waynesboro Department of Emergency Management, Emergency Communications Center for their ongoing and outstanding service and dedication to the community, and calls the attention to all our citizens. Set in her hand on this day, April 12th, 2021.
Thank you.
Members of the council, thank you so much for this recognition. Our staff works diligently 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to be the first point of contact for our community in times of crisis. They coordinate the response with our emergency responders, oftentimes doing what we call pre-arrival instructions, whether that's telling someone how to do CPR or control bleeding, and we've even delivered a baby or two over the telephone. These are remarkable individuals that work in stressful conditions and that do wonderful work. And we appreciate your recognition and support of our public safety telecommunicators. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, there is a recognition for Rockingham Cooperative presented by Mr. Short. Is there anybody here to accept that recognition?
I'm sure I'll see him this weekend because I go there all the time. I feel that's how I got the job.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Whereas in early 1921, over 1,000 farmers in Rockingham County gathered to come to a resolution for unfair and unprofitable prices on fertilizer and vowed to cooperatively purchase fertilizer at affordable prices from area suppliers. And from that meeting, an organization formed of 268 original members in Rockingham County. And whereas Rockingham Cooperative acted as a guide and example for other area cooperatives, furnishing farm supplies, feed, fertilizer, and all supplies needed for agricultural pursuits over its history and business, proving its value and standing the test of time by providing a valued service to its member owners and customers for the past 100 years. And whereas Corner Hardware originally opened for business in downtown Waynesboro in 1949 and has continually been open for business since that day. And whereas Rockingham Milling Company, Inc., a member of the Rockingham Cooperative, originally purchased Corner Hardware in 1989, located at 313 West Main Street in downtown Waynesboro, then rebranding it to Rockingham R Hardware with a move to 1000 West Broad Street. And whereas Rockingham County acquired RMC in 2010 and rebranded the store to the Rockingham Cooperative Ace Hardware, where it still operates today. Now, therefore, resolved on behalf of Waynesboro City Council to recognize and congratulate Rockingham Cooperative, acknowledging February 23rd, 1921 as the day of their original meeting of area farmers in Rockingham County that started the cooperative movement in honor of the 100th anniversary of the cooperative.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Item 5 is matters from council. Do members of council have anything they'd like to share this evening?
I'm going to give my COVID update in person this evening. As many of you have heard, the vaccinations continue to go well in Virginia. And this week, Augusta Health will be opening up their vaccination to individuals 16 years and older. So this is really going to increase the number of folks that are eligible. And hopefully we're going to get a lot more folks coming through now that they are going to be eligible to get the vaccine. You can access their website and sign up. If you are in one of the other groups and have not yet had your vaccine, you're still eligible. More pharmacies are getting it, more doctors' offices are getting it. So again, at this point, I think it'll be easy to access vaccines. So 18 years and above should be able to get signed up at some point. Some of the vaccines are 18 and above, some are 16 and above. So you'll have to pay attention to those things, but they can help you get up or get signed up for the correct thing on the website. So we continue to look good with our numbers, and let's keep it that way, is what I'd say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hostetter. Those numbers do sound encouraging considering where we came from last year at this time. Anybody else? Item 6 is to receive a presentation from Dr. Jonathan Downey, President of Blue Ridge Community College, regarding the college's annual report. Dr. Downey.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you, members of the City Council. It's my pleasure to be here today to thank you for the support you give Blue Ridge Community College and the guidance and the help every day of the year. I'd also like to thank City Manager, Mr. Ham, and our school superintendent, Jeff Cassell, who works so well with us in terms of all the partnerships that we do, the Career Coach Program, and other great programs that we have at Blue Ridge Community College. One of the most important things that you do as City Council is appoint outstanding people from the City of Waynesboro to represent you on the Blue Ridge Community College local board. And you have two excellent appointees to that board, Mary Louise Leek and John Matherly. Mary Louise is here tonight. I just want to point her out and say thank you for her service to the board. Excellent guidance for me in both cases. John is finishing his first term, and I'm hoping in the coming weeks you will be appointed to a second term for us. You can also claim Vermel Grant, who is on my board as well, although she's not a city resident. She is a long-standing member working with Dr. Cassell at the high school, so we're proud to have her on the board as well. It's been a challenging year for us, as it's been for all of you, I'm sure. Our employees have been resilient and resourceful, and our students have been just incredible. We're looking forward to the time when all of us can be together again on campus. Our plan right now is to resume full operations at Blue Ridge Community College for the fall 2021 semester that begins August 23rd, of course following CDC and health department guidelines. For the past year, we've been operating with classes primarily online, with about 15% of career-oriented instruction taking place in person. And I'm happy to say we only had a handful of cases on the campus and no widespread spread of the disease. So we were proud of that, thanks to all the planning and work that went into the effort. Our Waynesboro outpost has reopened past a few months. It's on a scheduled basis, so the citizens of Waynesboro can go into the Waynesboro outpost and get a full range of services in terms of signing up for classes and also having internet access and taking exams and having other resources there as well. So I'm really happy that we've been able to open up that early. We'll probably start opening up campus offices sometime in early July. Financially, we would have been very hard hit by the significant enrollment decline we have seen during the pandemic, but federal support we received from the CARES Act has helped us avoid layoffs and severe cuts. We're hopeful that additional federal funds will sustain us until our enrollment rebounds in the next year. We are optimistic about enrollment in the next year. The state government is providing extensive financial aid opportunities for students who wish to pursue in-demand career and technical program opportunities. So any resident who is within 400% of the poverty rate can essentially attend Blue Ridge Community College career and technical programs for free starting next year. And so that's going to be a significant help to area businesses as well as the students and the families themselves. We can, anyone who wants to pursue a skill that is a certification that leads to a job directly, or an associate degree that leads to a in-demand job is eligible for that funding. I want to thank each of you for the support we received from you for construction site work. From that funding, we have several pending projects that are important to the future of the college. The most pressing to me is a project to create a campus-wide door lock system that will increase the safety of our campus. We are also working on an irrigation system for our campus commons, where we hold graduation each year, and we're working in partnership with Augusta County to improve some old sewer lines on the campus as well. Longer term, we have plans of resurfacing some of the parking lots. We will have a virtual graduation on May 8th, followed by a drive-through picture-taking opportunity for students. And I'm really proud that city resident Joyce Coleman will be the first ever to have received an honorary degree from Blue Ridge Community College because of her work in the community and her long-standing service to Blue Ridge Community College. So you should be very proud of Joyce. She has been instrumental in the path of Blue Ridge Community College and connecting students of Waynesboro to our campus as well. I provided you with some literature about Blue Ridge Community College, and I'm always happy to answer any questions you have. But mostly, I just wanted to come in person and thank you for your service to the city and for your support of Blue Ridge Community College. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Downing. Are there any questions from council? Dr. Downing's presentation is for informational purposes and no action is required this evening. Thank you so much. Item 7 on the agenda is a presentation of the Waynesboro Public Schools adopted budget for fiscal year 2022 by Dr. Jeffrey Castle, Superintendent of the Schools. Dr. Castle.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Williams, City Council, City Administration. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. The school board adopted budget. School board did adopt the budget. I have a PowerPoint, but I'm not sure he's going to pull that up for me. I think Mr. Stan's coming around to do that. Thank you. The school board did adopt the budget at a call meeting on March 19th last month. The details of which I'll provide for you. The school board had one priority for fiscal year 2022, and that is to increase our employee compensation. We have not kept up as well as we needed. Our neighbors and staff in Augusta and the surrounding school divisions over the past years, but I'm very pleased to say that we've made great progress on that this year. Past years, there have been two priorities, one around employee benefits, and we have been able to address that, improving our contributions to health insurance and other employee benefits over the last 2 years. So we feel like we're very competitive with our benefit structure, and now we're focusing on becoming more competitive with employee compensation. And you'll see tonight that we've been able to do a significant step toward that in this budget. That's necessary not only to retain outstanding educators, but also for recruiting those. There's a shortage of teachers in the nation and in the state. Fortunately, we've not experienced quite the difficulty here in the Shenandoah Valley because of the numbers of colleges and universities that have teacher education programs in our area. The General Assembly adopted budget provides about 50%, just over 50% of our total budget. I've got a pretty short budget presentation for you tonight because it's really good news. In the past, sometimes I've had a lot of slides to justify requests for additional local funding. I don't find myself for the school board in that position this evening, I'm happy to tell you. So it's a pretty short presentation without a lot of graphs or additional information. I'm happy to provide that for you, and I know that you have been provided with a copy of the full budget. I'll talk just a bit about the General Assembly's adopted budget. I have indicated additional state funding and reduced state funding. Those will be lines in the state budget that have an increase or decrease of $10,000 or more. The adopted budget from the state has close to 80 line items in it and is comprised of 2 pages of line item budgets. The ones that provided us with additional state funding were particularly the state share of the average 5% raise for our employees. When the state says they're providing their share of a 5% raise, it's really about 1/3 of the necessary funds. The locality has to provide 2/3 in order to meet that requirement and get the state funds to support it. That's because the state funds positions based on what they identify as SOQ or standard of quality, instructional and supports positions. No school in the state can operate on those numbers. They're not standards of quality by any means. Less than 50% of our employees would fall under the state model of funding. And therefore, they fund less than half of those positions. And then they adjust for the local composite index, which is an index that takes into account the locality's ability to pay. There is additional funding also for school counselors. Significant funding for the Virginia Preschool Initiative, which is a four-year-olds program, and early childhood education that provides for 3-year-olds, and in some cases even birth to 2, for students that are particularly high needs or at risk. Money to support students who are educationally at risk, which are a substantial number of students this year due to the pandemic, as you might imagine, and also money to support our English language learners. We did have reduced state funding for many of the standards of quality programs. The state basically took money out of other programs to put into the ones I've just talked about above. And we did have reduced funding for K-3 class size reduction. Again, I believe that was simply a matter of redirecting its funds to other programs. I want to talk a bit about the demographics of our students before I talk about local funding and other sources of revenue. We have on the day that I presented this, we had 3,111 students. That's pre-K through 12. That number changes daily with students moving in and out. We had 2,849 in K-12. That's the average daily membership that DOE uses to fund basic ed programs, standards of quality, and incentive programs. Pre-K for 4-year-olds is a different program, the BPI program that I talked about, which was serving 112, and pre-K for 3-year-olds, we're serving 82 students. Some of those 3 and 4-year-old students were in the building at Wayne Hills Preschool Center, but many of them were connected virtually with a device from home. I have watched instruction virtually of 3 and 4-year-olds. I still can't completely wrap my head around it, but these teachers do an amazing job of that, and the parents and students are engaged, and we see students making progress even as 3 and 4-year-olds in the virtual world. It's not like being in the building, but I'm really proud of the work that our teachers have been able to do from age 3 through senior year. You'll see the racial and ethnic groups represented. We are a very diverse school system, about 50% white students and 50%, actually 51%, 49% minority students. Economically disadvantaged, we're not able to calculate that number any longer because all students in Waynesboro are eligible for free and reduced lunch. That's because the USDA community eligibility provision provides that if you have a high free and reduced lunch percentage in your school division, then the administrative burden and bureaucracy of doing all the applications and administering that overrides it costs more than the benefit. So 2 years ago, we were able to qualify for the community eligibility provision where no one has to apply for a free reduced lunch. Any student in Waynesboro is provided breakfast and lunch, and therefore we don't collect any information about income from families, and we're unable to calculate an economically disadvantaged percentage. We were just over 60% when we qualified for the community eligibility provision, so we are assuming that we're at that level or a bit higher now, with probably 2/3 of our students economically disadvantaged. We provide many services for students with disabilities on a wide range of the spectrum, from fairly mild learning disabilities to students with really high needs in order to achieve their educational goals and graduate from high school. We have 362 students with individualized education plans. Those are around their ability to do academic work, certainly somehow connected to cognitive disabilities, and 200 students with Section 504 plans. Section 504 plans are health care plans generally, that a student has a health condition that's significant enough that it can impact their learning and ability to access programs. So we have special plans for those students. 229 English language learners representing 8 languages spoken. We do have an ELL teacher, and you'll see the state refers to ESL, English as a second language. In some places, we refer to those students as English language learners, but we do have ELL teachers in every building, more than one in some of our larger buildings. We were serving 40 students experiencing homelessness in March. That was 55 students last school year. That number is actually lower than it's been in past years. And we served 22 students in foster care. All of that's significant because these are students that are at higher risk. And you'll see, again, I mentioned the state provided a lot of additional funding for at-risk programs, but you'll see that theme repeated in other places in the budget. So the revenue summary. The state revenues increased by just over $1 million, $1,151,000. The standard of quality programs, which was increased for sales tax and English language learners, increased. There was a decrease for remedial summer school. The state expects us to utilize some of our CARES Act funds for summer school, and we will do that. Incentive programs. Our programs where the locality has to match their share of the state funds in order to receive the funds. That's the bulk of the increase at $778,000. Those are the programs for at-risk students, the BPI initiative, mixed delivery preschool, and it also includes the compensation supplement for the raise of 5%. If you don't do the 5% raise, you don't get the state share of the money. And finally, we have lottery-funded programs, which funds programs in which there may or may not be a local match. But the lottery-funded programs are supporting foster care out at risk. We did see an increase this year in a new line of infrastructure and operations. Many years ago, we used to receive those funds to help support transportation, maintenance, and those kinds of costs of doing business that the school system has as a large organization. During the Great Recession about a decade ago, the state stopped funding those, providing funding for maintenance, transportation, and some of those other costs. And they have instituted this year a per pupil allocation to help support that. And then again, we have a decrease in K-3 class size funding, but that's offset by increases in other programs. Our federal revenues increased overall by $1.5 million, $1,581,000. If you look just at traditional federal programs, things like Title VI for special education, Title III for supporting instruction, Title IV, which is student support, adult basic ed, the increase is $118,000. However, we did budget almost $1.5 million, $1.463 million of CARES Act funds for FY 2022. From the CARES Act, we will receive $3.2 million, and we have to expend those funds by September of 2023. So we used not quite half in the 2022 budget, and holding just over half of that $3.2 million to be utilized in the FY 23 budget year. We may or may not spend all of those CARES funds, but we have budgeted and would ask for appropriation of those if they are needed. And we have included them in the budget And I'll talk about that some more in the expenditure slide. We have a category of other fund revenues. That's revenue that the school division generates itself. It's things like facility rental, rebates and refunds. We have regional programs where we pay employee costs, salaries or benefits, and then we get reimbursed from other school divisions. We generate a significant amount of money through the federal E-rate program. Previously, that's been about $170,000 to $200,000 a year. Our E-rate reimbursement will be lower for the coming year. And we also bill for Medicaid services. Our nursing staff and special education provides physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, medications. And our billing to Medicaid last year approached $200,000. We've not been able to bill. We've billed some Medicaid this year, but nothing like in previous years because we weren't for the entire year. We continue to provide services and have some billing, but we've reduced that in anticipation that we may not have that reimbursement coming in next year. And then the final category is the local funds that you, the city council, provides for us to operate the school division. It appears on the spreadsheets that increases by $1.3 million, $1,365,000. That's based on the local revenue sharing agreement, and that's been particularly good for us this year, and would have been last year had it not been for the pandemic. What happened last year and what the note says is the local funding would have increased just about $500,000 last year, $497,000. And the school board had adopted a budget and we have had budgeted planning on that. Then the pandemic occurred and the city, like most places, reduced their funding and reduced it to the funding of fiscal year 20, the level funding we would call it, due to the pandemic. So had the adopted budget shown that, the increase would really be $867,000 this year. That's a little bit complicated. I hope I explained that to your satisfaction that you understand that. But having received the $497 in this year, the increase by funding formula is really $867,000. We're able to accomplish things that we've waited a long time to accomplish with these funds. I feel like we're really making progress in the school division. This is my 8th year of presenting a budget. It's by far the best budget I've presented. We've been able to make significant improvements here at the high school with our facility. One thing we've not completed yet is painting the auditorium floor, but that will be done this summer. And a few other small items like that. But we've been able to address a number of facility needs, both here at Waynesboro High School and other schools. And we're able to address, as I've said, employee benefits and compensation. We're making progress, not where we need to be yet, but we're getting there. I appreciate your help and support with doing that. So that's the summary of the revenue budget, showing the state funds. That's right at 50%, federal funds at 6%. General state funds would run more than 50, but because of the additional state funds are just a little under that. And because of the CARES Act fund. And then the local funds account for 39% of that budget. Talk a minute about the expenditures. Salary increase accounts for $1.7 million of that increase. That's the 5% average raise for employees. It increases the compensation rates for our substitutes. It increases the compensation for coaches and extracurricular duties, things like drama and club sponsors. Those salary scales had not changed in 10 years. They did not change since the recession of 2009 and 10. We did add additional positions in this. Not all of that salary increase. Part of that is increased positions and things like school counselor. The requirements from the state changed and we're required to have more school counselors. We need additional special education teachers by law and the additional funding for the Virginia preschool program requires that we have additional preschool teachers because we have more students in preschool. We also have added some positions due to the COVID pandemic. We will pay for those positions with CARES Act funds, with the understanding that when we come out of the pandemic and those positions are not needed, they'll be reduced through attrition at that time. I would hope that's within 1 year, it might be 2 years. But we've included things like a full-time director of health services, which we actually added this year, a budgeted position. We had to have that to do the contact tracing and manage the pandemic. Added school nurse position here at Waynesboro High School because of the number of students. We've added a phys ed teacher to reduce class size numbers at the middle school. We've actually added a couple of kindergarten positions because we expect to have more kindergartners. Some families chose not to send their students to kindergarten last year as 5-year-olds. They'll be coming in as 6-year-olds. So we are anticipating a larger kindergarten class. We have additional money for bus drivers if we can hire those because we need to reduce numbers on the buses. So we have additional buses, but we need to hire the drivers to do that. And also additional instructional assistants just to assist in buildings. With we're going to have, some people refer to a learning gap. We're referring to it as unfinished learning, and the state is referring to it now as unfinished learning. It's really not a gap between our students and anyone else in the region, state, or nation. We're almost a year of schooling this year. There's a lot of unfinished learning to take place. I'm very proud of our instruction here in Waynesboro. We were able to have really all of our students connected via hotspots if they didn't have internet connection at home. So all of our students had internet. And we in elementary had virtual teachers and in-person teachers, and they weren't trying to do both jobs. If you know teachers in other localities or divisions where they were trying to do virtual instruction and in-person instruction, was extremely difficult, very challenging. Many localities report up to 30% of their students don't have internet, and so they weren't able to connect. Our students saw a teacher every day. We had synchronous learning for students, so they were with a teacher for some part of the day, virtually every day, and many localities weren't able to accomplish that. So I feel like our students, while we've got learning to make up, I think we're ahead of many school divisions right now. I'm very proud of the work of our teachers and aides and everyone in our school division to do that. I would be remiss if I didn't comment on our cafeteria workers, who, as you know, have served meals throughout the pandemic. We never stopped serving meals from last March till now. We served 2 meals a day for students. There's an increase in benefits of almost $1 billion, $976,000. That's associated with the salary increase. As you know, salaries increase. Federal taxes, payroll taxes are a percentage of that. And VRS, the retirement system, is also calculated as a percentage of the salary. So when salaries increase, just the percentages of the benefits increase that number also. And then in the non-salary increases, that's just over $1 million. Much of that, in fact, most of that is the budgeting of the CARES Act funds for things like additional cleaning supplies, additional maintenance costs associated with filters, upgrades to HVAC systems, those kind of things that are included as non-salary, but will be paid with CARES Act funds. Those would be one-time costs generally. So there's the expenditure budget. The good news is, and you'll see the 3 categories. The good news is when you compare the revenues to the expenditure, it balances. And that's the goal. Always for us, but it's not always been what we've been able to achieve on the first try. And we've had to come back and ask for additional funds. As you can see, we are receiving considerable state funds as well as local funds. Presumably both of those funding sources are sustainable. The state does not easily provide money for compensation if they don't know that it's sustainable. And based on our funding formula, we're also presuming that the local city appropriation is sustainable. So we've put a lot of that into compensation. I'll end with, and you can read that yourself, we do have credible personnel, not just teachers, but our bus drivers, custodians, aides, cafeteria workers, nurses, who are caring and supportive, talented people. School divisions are very personnel heavy. Over 80% of our expenditure budget goes to salaries and benefits. In fact, if you look there, 54 and 24 gets us in there right at 79%. And the reason the non-salary is a higher percentage, it has over $1 million of CARES Act. Most years that runs about 80 to 82% of our cost is for personnel. We're a very people-intensive business. It's about the people we have taking care of our students and educating them. We feel like we must care for those, and the school board has had a 5-year goal of doing 4% raise each year for the next 5 years. That got derailed last year because of the pandemic. So because of the state effort and the 5% we're able to do this year, we're exceeding that goal and well on our way to meeting the 5-year goal. The other thing that you see a lot of here is money to support students in terms of shelter and food, being safe and secure at school, and having a pleasant and adequate learning environment. We found many of our students are having significant mental health needs that we're going to have to address their social and emotional needs and learning before they're able to access the instructional strategies that we have in the curriculum that we're able to offer them academically. There's money here in many programs to take care of those basic needs so that they can learn. We will use CARES Act for some of those funds, but much of it is state and local funded as well. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the budget.
Thank you, Dr. Castle. Do we have any questions for Dr. Castle?
Just one question. Thank you for that presentation for our school board member, Brooke Smith, for being over with us this evening too. Appreciate the presentation. The question I have related to this exciting news about the pre-K program and the potential ability to provide additional resources for that. I guess my question is, so I wrote down 82 for the 3-year-old program, 112 for the 4. What are your sort of thoughts about the ability to facilitate space and accommodate space? What sort of growth are you imagining for additional access to that program next year?
Well, we're currently running 2 classrooms that at one point housed the credit union. And when the Waynesboro Employee Credit Union merged with Valley Star, those rooms were used as offices for a couple of years for Head Start. We had plans to renovate those for this year. We ended up not needing that space because of the pandemic. But we'll have those rooms complete by the end of June. So those will house an additional 36 students. The standards have changed in the state. We used to have 18 students in a classroom of 4-year-olds, teacher and an aide. That now goes to 20. So that it gives us additional capacity. For 3-year-olds, we can now have 18 rather than 16. In fact, last week I was at Wayne Hills because I do have some concern, and we have some concern about the capacity, but we'll be able to house 200 students there, if not more. We are looking at trying to capture some additional space. There's a room there now that's used for art, music, library, all of those kind of in one room for preschool. We could do that room to room and capture another room. But I think that's a great question. I'm sure the facility space there is limited, but we're able to manage it at least for the coming year or 2. It's a little bit uncertain of how many students will attend the 3 and 4-year-old program because it's not compulsory attendance as kindergarten and first grade are. Kindergarten is not completely compulsory attendance. There's a way parents can ask the superintendent to waive kindergarten for a year, which some did. That's pretty rare generally, but because of the pandemic, they did. But we don't really know how many students will take advantage of the pre-K program until we have it. What we do know is that we've had waiting lists for the last several years for 4-year-olds. And the last 2 or 3 years that we've been doing 3-year-olds, we have waiting lists. So there are more students who would attend and need to be served.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. President. The average daily membership, I think is the term, ADM. Tell us about the trend this year. I know that over the last several years, there have been some ups and downs. This year it was very different. And how does it look different, and what do you anticipate for the coming school year?
So we were increasing, as Ron said there, until about 2018, and we were just over 3,000 students in the K-12. We saw a decline of about 50 students a year for the previous 3 years, so we were down to budgeting at 2,850. In fact, the number you saw today is 2,849, and so we feel like that's stabilized. It's a little bit hard to know that for sure this year because we still have a lot of students who are virtual, but those students are engaging and connecting with the teachers and resources daily, or not necessarily daily. It's like in regular school, we have some absenteeism. But we believe that the enrollment has stabilized, and in fact, our projections for next year look like we could see an increase begin to start again. I think that's not completely surprising because there's some housing being built, a considerable expansion of housing in Waynesboro, as you all well know, out of Windy Grove, down the Parkway, and other places in the city. A number of houses just being built on vacant lots in various neighborhoods. And so we believe, I can tell you that we're confident that enrollment has stabilized. I'm optimistic that it's going to trend upward, but I don't have a crystal ball. I would point out also that Mr. Wheeler, our school board chair, is here this evening, in addition to Ms. Smith and some other board members. They were behind me, so I wasn't sure who came if I did see this.
Are there any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hassel.
Thank you.
Item 8 on the agenda is to hold a public hearing to receive comments regarding a proposal to increase property tax levies based on an increase in assessed values. Mr. Ham?
Vice Mayor Williams and members of council. Just a few words of introduction on this matter prior to the public hearing. The Code of Virginia for the Commonwealth requires localities to conduct general reassessments of real property every 2 years. The code requirement determines the frequency. In the case of cities less than 30,000 in population, which Waynesboro is one, that frequency is every 2 years, and this is a general reassessment year for our community. Additionally, as I mentioned, those assessments are required to be 100% of fair market value. In that regard, this is an empirical exercise, which our general assessor conducts, and she's completed that process for this year. The code also includes a provision for notifying the public in certain instances, more specifically when the general reassessment would result in an increase of 1% or more in the total real property tax levy. The city council must conduct a public hearing, and prior to that, the council must advertise the effective tax rate increase. In our case this year, the general reassessment produces an assessment increase of 9.1% over the 2020 assessment. And the effective tax rate increase is 7 cents, or the stated a different way, the tax rate required to produce the same tax revenue as the current year prior to the reassessment would be 83 cents. So this evening, the council has, having advertised that information in accordance with the code, will conduct a public hearing on the general reassessment, the increase in the effective tax rate. When the mayor, or excuse me, the vice mayor gavels the public hearing to order, we'll begin with those speakers who have signed up and are here present. Then we'll move to the call-in speakers, and then finally, as become our recent habit, we'll provide written comment that has been submitted to the clerk and council prior to the meeting. One additional note that as a companion, this falls in our budget process. The council will conduct a public hearing on the tax rate itself at our next regular scheduled meeting on April 26th, which will also be held here at Waynesboro High School auditorium. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Ham. Could you, before I proceed, explain the light system?
Yes, so the speakers here in person can take note of the lighting indicators there. What green means speak. Each speaker will have 4 minutes to provide comment. You're not obligated to use all 4 minutes. When you get to, I think, 30 seconds remaining, the yellow light will indicate that please wrap up. And then when the red light comes on, please conclude your remarks. We ask that you do that. Even if you haven't quite finished, please wrap up at this time. We'll look over at my colleagues. The yellow indicator comes on in 30 seconds, correct?
1 minute.
1 minute, thank you. So, my mistake. Yellow light comes on 1 minute, red light, please conclude.
And are there any questions from council for Mr. Ham? Before I begin the public hearing, I will remind speakers you have 4 minutes to address council, and please state your name and your address for our records. I hereby open the public hearing. We'll begin with individuals who are attending the meeting in person. And do you have anyone signed up?
I do. Dwight Williams.
Good evening, Madam Vice Mayor and members of City Council. My name is Dwight Williams of 2818 Jefferson Lane. I come to you tonight to indicate my support for a tax-neutral position regarding the recent assessments of our real estate here in Waynesboro. In early 2020, Governor Northam mandated crippling economic sanctions to combat the coronavirus. Sanctions that included reduced working hours for certain businesses and closures of businesses that were deemed as not essential. That resulted in lower incomes and lost wages for many people here in Waynesboro. We fast forward to today, Virginia is still opening up, but at a much slower pace than most states. And that said, many of our residents are still significantly impacted. Many of our residents have had to experience layoffs, reductions in force, loss of annual bonuses or raises, and loss of income resulting from these crippling economic sanctions. It is simply the wrong time to levy tax increases when the public is still trying to recover. From a personal perspective, my property was reassessed at 11.2%, from $221,000 in 2019 to a proposed $249,000 this year, a difference of $28,000. My annual property tax would go up another $241. This is on a property where I've made no new improvements since I purchased it. Now, I've been blessed to maintain a job throughout this pandemic, but many folks in this community have not. As Dr. Castle said in his presentation, found very interesting, they estimate that 2/3 of students are economically disadvantaged in our city. And now we're entertaining raising taxes on the parents of these students. That doesn't help them. To me, that sounds wrong. You know, we elected each of you to serve the city, to lead the city and serve the residents responsibly. I fail to see how levying higher taxes accomplishes that purpose. It's not the responsible thing to do. It was stated in the April budget meetings that the state average is $1.06 per $100 assessed. Just because our tax rate is not at the state average does not mean that it should be. Ours should be based on what is good for our residents here, not a comparison to nearby cities and what state average is. It does not make any sense to further punish our good residents by levying higher taxes upon them. If the tax increases are to help avoid a budget deficit, perhaps it's time that we reevaluate some of the services the city provides and reduce the budget to a more sustainable level. It's economics 101 that we cannot tax our way into prosperity, and raising taxes in the middle of a bad economy is simply irresponsible. Therefore, I implore council members to not burden Waynesboro residents with higher taxes and to do the responsible thing by adopting the tax-neutral position of 83 cents per $100 assessed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Gabriel Laconi.
Good evening. Sorry, this is my first one of these, so excuse any informalities or faux pas you may hear. I don't have anything prepared, so I'll just speak plainly, speak from the heart. I've been living in this country for 20 years. I came from Argentina. Always in Waynesboro, went to Waynesboro High School, went to Blue Ridge Community College, worked in the community, still work in the community. 11 years ago, I got married. We bought our first home. We did some improvements. We're proud of our home. We love our home. This year, the city says that our house is worth 24.6% more than it was last year, which is extremely detrimental to our finances. I would have been okay with a biannual increase, but that's not the case. All of a sudden, in the year when we lost 20% of our income because I was furloughed 20% of my hours, and so was my wife, we're asked to pay almost 25% over the previous year's value. This is extremely detrimental, and a lot of people are still reeling in from the pandemic. There's still people struggling. I consider myself a lucky one that I still have to work and I still, be able to provide, but a lot of people can't. So I would love to have the city reassess what they're doing with the taxes and, take care of the people that are making this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Charlotte Bainham, and I apologize if I mispronounced that.
Good evening, I'm Charlotte Bainham. I live in 652 North Manchester Avenue. I don't do this occasionally, but I gotta tell you, I am happy. Y'all want to raise our taxes during the pandemic. I'm a frontline person. I have never missed a day of work in this whole entire pandemic. But I'm single. I work my butt off to get my house. And you want to raise it 21.6%? I barely make it as it is. I refuse to lose my house. Y'all, the things that don't happen, my road doesn't get plowed. Not once in the 4 years I've lived here has my road been plowed. There was a sign knocked down, my road sign knocked down. I called 2 years ago to have that put back up. I just had it put back up because I didn't call again. Y'all need to step it up. You want to raise our taxes? Then step up, Waynesboro. You got 340 cars ripping down up and down the street. Nobody there. Not a damn police officer. You got parties going on. Oh my God. I can't even open my windows. I got marijuana coming into my house from the neighbor across the street. Spotlights coming into my home. You want me to pay taxes? But you all don't want to step it up. You got homeless people. Dr. Huster needs to know. The SPOH in Waynesboro, Social Determinants of Health. That's homeless people. People starving, don't have money. People that can't pay their water bill, don't have water. But yet you want to raise the taxes. What are you doing with money? That's my question. What are you doing with it? Because if I can't get my stuff fixed, I can't even get a simple sign up, I can't get it to my driveway because my road's not up, I have to pay a neighbor to plow down 3rd Street. Because you all come down Winchester, North Winchester Avenue, push it on over and leave us with a huge pile at the end of 3rd Street where we can't get out. But for me to have to pay a neighbor so I can get over to the hospital to work every single day, that's not right. So I'm asking you all, step up your services if you're going to increase our taxes. Because it's not fair. Not at all. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Easily acknowledged.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Leroy Wells, my wife Nancy. We live at 512 Cherry Avenue. I've just got a few bullet points that I'd like to bring up. Currently, inflation is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2%. We're also receiving roughly $4 million in federal funds from the government as a result of the CARES Act. Leaving the rate the same or equal to approximately 9%, which equals to about a 9% increase. In reviewing our taxes and our new assessment, my wife and I are looking at approximately a 16.7% increase. As a community, we continue to grow. We need to control our growth. Those that want to build here and develop here need to be taxed and taking care of our infrastructure and our community, not taxing our individual community members for their benefits and gain. I ask that you reduce the rate to 83 cents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kurt Lilly.
Good evening, I'm Kurt Lilly. I live at 218 Skyland Avenue. Dwight mentioned how hard the past year has been on our citizens. And now inflation is hitting, gasoline's going up, utilities, food. It isn't making the news yet, but it's a very real cost and we're all paying it. The way I see it, expansion of housing means that the city is going to get more revenue even with a neutral effective tax rate. So that is your raise. So when I want to raise, I don't get it, right? Somebody has to give me that raise. And just because I want it doesn't mean that my boss is going to give it to me. So I am advocating for a neutral effective tax rate. Thank you.
Dave Sheldon.
Good evening, everyone. My name is David Sheldon. I live at 225 Claybrook Drive. Just a point of clarity, it's my understanding from reading the website that council was generally interested in seeking revenue neutral plans between the rate change and the increase in assessed value of the homes. Is that still the case in terms of a genuine neutral position?
We're just here to hear comments. We're not here to answer questions tonight.
All right. Well, I guess my comment is, if that is going to be a genuine interest with an average of 9.1% increase, and that's an average, that's not the median, that's just the average. The move from 0.9 to 0.83 doesn't get us there. So I would ask the council to relook at numbers. If you want genuine neutral, revenue neutral, it's going to be it'll have to be less than 83 cents per hundred. Thank you.
Hello, Herman Wells, 551 South Magnolia Avenue. I think everyone's pretty much laid it out for you. So let me give you a different angle. I spent a lot of years as a leader in the military and as a manager in government. And there were certain things that certain leaders did that set them apart. They didn't say, yes, 0.91. They said, no, we're staying at 0.83. That's what I call hard leadership. Easy leadership is when you say, we'll just take 0.91, because you don't have to rock the apples, upset the cart, you don't have to dig in, you don't have to make tough decisions. That's what you guys do. Everybody here, whether you're a city manager, city leaders, or if you're in town council, and it's a hard, hard job. And you get my thorough respect for it. What's my job? My job is to take what you give me. You give us neutrality. My job, I don't get to complain about what comes my way. If that means the pool isn't open but 3 months out of the year, the grass in the park doesn't get cut every week, I need to suck that up. So for me, I'm willing to accept what you give me back to keep the tax rate down. Thank you very much for your time.
Judith Westwood.
Judith Westwood, 412 Pine Avenue. I actually want to share a different opinion and express my support for proposed increase in property taxes. I understand that there's general resentment towards increased taxes. People are really wary of a kind of bloated government budget. But I think that there's just as real of a danger to having an underfunded city government. I would really like for there to be the kind of public services and infrastructure in Waynesboro to make it a vibrant city and serve the needs of different community members, especially the children in Waynesboro. We just listened to the school budget and different things laid out there, and I think that this extra revenue really helps support things like that, and maybe the school budget would have to be reconsidered or reevaluated if we didn't have this increase in property taxes. So yeah, that is my perspective, is I think that it can be a really positive thing, and of course that does also put some responsibility on city council members, as the previous speaker said, that you're here to represent us. And so I think as a citizen of Waynesboro, I would want to see the city council really investing that money well in order to make the kind of improvements and I don't know, making Waynesboro an attractive and positive place to live. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrea Jackson.
My name's Andrea Jackson, and I live in Ward A. And I've been here all my life, and I understand that the majority of people who come out, they're against the taxes, and it's been like that for a long time. And I know that a lot of I've spoken, and I've been in city politics for quite a while. And when we talk about the infrastructure and invested in our city, you know what I mean? When we get down to the budget and the numbers, we quite frankly say, well, we don't have the money, or we need to raise taxes. And you know, the gentleman was saying, you know, going up to 90% is the easy. I think quite frankly, the history of this town is that would be the hard and very courageous thing to do. Because the thing is that, quite frankly, Waynesboro statistically is one of the lowest tax rates in Virginia. There's 39 incorporated cities, and 30 cities have a higher rate. 2 have the same, and 6 have lower. And the average, what we have is 90, but the average is $1.06. So when we're getting down to 0.83, it's like, hold on a second. It's getting down to austerity. We're getting down to taking away from what we have. And the thing is that, you know, and I've had conversations with quite a few of y'all say, yeah, I want to blame the old regime because they did not invest and that they did not raise taxes. But y'all don't want to take up and say, well, this is what we're doing now. Y'all want to do the same thing the old regime did, but y'all don't want to take the blame for that. Because if we do not invest in our city, it's going to go down. We are at a turning point in Waynesboro. There is a lot of poverty in this city, a lot of people. This is a city where you've got a lot of people that is the have and the have-not. We have a high rate of rentership. So a lot of these people that are going to be paying these taxes can quite frankly probably afford it. And so what we need to do is figure out what kind of community we want. Do we want to invest in our children and the infrastructure to make this the best community we want? Or do we want to keep the money in our pockets? Because the thing is, the poor, everybody pay taxes. But we got this, I'm in Waynesboro, I'm not like, we got all these houses coming up, all these developments, all this stuff, all these big houses. These people can afford these taxes. And I commend you to just say that even if you just keep it at the 90%, you don't go back to the 0.83 to the policies that got us in the situation we in now, and we can try to use this money that's the extra to move forward. We're not asking you to be able to go up to $1. It's just 90 cents. And we have a reputation of being a place where people don't want to pay taxes. They don't, that's, to some people, that's the patriotic thing. You want to take care of your people. You want to add on to it. And I understand, like, this lady, what she was saying, y'all need to, be.
Thank you so much. Your time is up. If you can wrap up your comments.
What I want to say is what she was saying was very correct. I commend her in that y'all do need to equally provide if you get this money to distribute it properly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do we have any callers in the queue?
If the caller could go ahead and speak, you're in the queue. We have a M. Henderson on the line. If you can go ahead and please make your comments. Apparently, we're not making a good connection, so if the caller could submit written comments to the clerk, Ms. Bortle, through the city's email or website, we will certainly include those in the record and pass them along to the council. So, Vice Mayor, I have a couple of written comments that I previously submitted. Ms. Andrea Biscay writes in opposition to the current rate and advocates for something less than that. Ms. Regina McLaughlin similarly opposes the 90-cent rate and encourages consideration and approval of the 83-cent rate. And then Maria Della Martinez Anon also writes in opposition of 90 cents and encourages consideration of something less than that.
I I hereby close this public hearing. No action is required by council this evening, and we appreciate the input from all the speakers. Item 9 on the agenda was to hold a public hearing on a rezone request for 1115 Ivy Street. Mr. Ham.
Yes, ma'am. Vice Mayor Williams and members of council, this evening, we were originally planning to hold a public hearing on an application by Roxana Kari Mianpour to rezone a property on Ivy Street, at 1115 Ivy Street, from highway business to local business. When the advertisement for the public hearing was issued, we had not contemplated that we would be returning to meeting in person, and in that regard, failed to include information about the fact that we would be meeting in person at this location. And for that reason, we are advised that the proper procedure should be to re-advertise and conduct the public hearing. We will do so. We have re-advertised. We will conduct the public hearing for 26 on April 26, our next regular meeting. As a courtesy, if anyone is present tonight with the intention of speaking at that public hearing, we can receive your comments, though they won't be part of the formal record of the public hearing. We can certainly hear them this evening, and the council will benefit from having heard them. There is one such person signed up, Herman Wells. So, Mr. Wells, if you have comments.
I apologize, comments with regard to Walnut Chestnut Avenue and the public hearing for that has already taken place.
Okay. So that concludes that matter.
All right, item number 10 on the agenda is a second consideration of an ordinance rezoning 312 and 316 Walnut Avenue and 325 Chestnut Avenue, Waynesboro, Virginia. This item was introduced and discussed at council's previous meeting. Do I have a motion to adopt the ordinance rezoning 312 and 316 Walnut Avenue and 325 Chestnut Avenue?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Hosto. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Are there any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay? The motion passes 3-1. Item 11 is to receive the recommendation of the Planning Commission and consider introducing an ordinance rezoning certain parcels from LI, light industrial, or LB, local business, to MXB, mixed business. Mr. Judah.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and members of council.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, members of council. You've heard about this issue a couple times already. The Planning Commission has heard about it many times, so I won't rehash the entire thing. But I do want to give you a little bit of background just in case anyone is here who has not been aware of what's been going on in this area. My clicker is not working from this distance. Somebody would mind pressing the next button on the laptop for me? Sorry, Mr. Short, do you mind hitting the next button? That. So this began as a project to try to address issues with land use in the basic city area. It started with a number of public meetings in 2019. Some were focused on city services, policing, and property maintenance. Others were focused on soliciting input for public projects. Then we moved on to a property owner survey along the Commerce and Delphine corridor. We ended up with 17 responses out of 70 surveys mailed. So it wasn't a great response, but it was still a decent sample. And after that, we had a focus group with property owners and did a series of planning commission discussions in ordinance development through 2020. We ended up with the passage of a text amendment creating a new zone in November of 2020. Concluded that the current zones that were present in the zoning ordinance weren't sufficient to meet the needs of this area. Then we moved from having the text zone, which didn't change the rules for any particular property, just created a category, to moving properties into that category. And for that, we had a joint public hearing with the Planning Commission in March of 2021, which you all remember, I'm sure. And then the Planning Commission considered the issue at its regular business meeting on March 16th, 2021. And I'm here to present the recommendation that they made after that meeting. Thank you, Mr. Short, appreciate it. This is the current zoning in that area. As you can see, it's kind of a patchwork, and the whole goal of this project is to try to not resolve that, but move us toward a more consistent set of rules. We currently have a situation where industrial uses that are incompatible with residential uses are scattered or allowed in certain areas, where certain uses that are the same as, somebody that wants to start a certain kind of business and there's businesses all around it, they're not allowed to because that parcel is zoned residential, it's right in the middle of industrial, or other, somebody wants to build a home, it's on an industrial parcel, even though all the neighboring parcels are residential. Folks are allowed to potentially do noxious or potentially health harmful uses next to single family homes. So there were a number of different things that we were attempting to address, as well as lots of uses that would be totally fine next to homes that are not allowed in the LB district. So we created this new MXP district, and you can move to the next slide, please. That would try to resolve some of those issues by creating more of a mixed-use zone. As I mentioned, some of the problems include residential compatibility of light industrial zones scattered amongst single-family homes, the inability to convert those industrial properties to residences, and then the inconsistency of the zoning rules that's frustrated a number of prospects that we've had here over the years. And a couple more issues that we identified as well. Changing market conditions on Commerce Avenue, where the current zoning is really geared towards trying to get small retail shops and downtown type of businesses along Commerce Avenue. And the honest truth we had to run up against is that just is not a realistic use for that area since the widening of Delphine, since all the traffic is now on Delphine, that's where all the commercial demand is. And additionally, we just don't have the kind of market that can support that many of that type of business, and already struggling to attract them to East Main Street and downtown and other areas. And also the difficulty of providing parking in this area was a main concern. Our ordinance is designed to require enough parking for as many cars as can possibly show up to a business, and that's kind of how things are going on in the West End, suburban development. If you look at that on Google Earth, you'll see that most of that area is just parking lot. And that's not really compatible with the historic subdivision patterns like this, where you have legacy buildings built up to the street meant to serve pedestrians with insufficient parking around them. And you end up with situations like the Basic City Luncheonette, where they have to buy and tear down a building in order to provide the required parking. And then we had a comparable situation on Ohio Street as well. We've extended the new zone out there as well. So the proposed zone, as you all passed it, would allow for a wider range of residential and commercial uses, as well as some clean industrial uses that have no negative impacts on surrounding properties. It would also reduce the parking requirement for properties that are already built out in these historic areas. So we're moving to rezone all light industrial properties in the lower Basic City area, as well as most local business parcels along Commerce, Ohio, Main Street Extended, and then some RG5 parcels necessary for continuity, trying to move us towards having a zone. The whole point of zoning is that you're supposed to have sort of a contiguous large district with a similar set of rules. So we're still not there, but we're trying to move in that direction from where we have been. So a public hearing was held on March 8th, 2021. Planning Commission considered the issue at its March 16th, 2021 regular business meeting and moved to recommend approval by a 7-0 vote. So now it's before council. Does council have any questions for me about the proposal?
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. G today? Okay, hearing no questions, is there a motion to introduce the ordinance rezoning certain parcels from light industrial or local business to mixed business?
So,
Thank you, Mr. Short. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Is there any discussion among the council? This ordinance will be considered at the April 26th regular business meeting. Item number 12 is an ordinance appropriating $2,927 from the insurance proceeds to the general fund to replenish the city manager's contingency for expenditures related to fence repairs at the cemetery. Mr. Ham.
yes, ma'am. So essentially, we had an accident in which a vehicle damaged the fence at the cemetery. The staff undertook to accomplish those repairs, funding that with money from the city manager's contingency. We've made a claim against the insurance company, and we've been received those proceeds. So this is simply reimbursing us for the repair expense.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Ham? Okay, is there a motion to introduce an ordinance appropriating $2,927 in insurance proceeds to the general fund? Thank you, Mr. Allen. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Any discussion? This appropriation ordinance will be considered at the April 26th meeting. Item 13 is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating $20,717 in grant funds from the Virginia Tourism Corporation to the general fund to reimburse advertising expenditures in the tourism department. Mr. Ham.
Yes, ma'am. One of the elements of this appropriation is a state grant that furnishes 75% against, or excuse me, 25% against a 75% match by the city. The other is a fully funded marketing leverage program provided by the state, so that's 100% state funds.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ham. Any questions? Okay, is there a motion to introduce an ordinance appropriating $20,717 in grant funds to the general fund for reimbursements?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Hostetter. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Any discussion? Okay, this item will be considered at the April 26th meeting. Item number 14 is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating a Brownsfield grant from the Environmental Protection Agency in the amount of $300,000 to the CIP Fund for Downtown Revitalization Assessment. Mr. Ham.
Yes, ma'am. I'm calling Mr. Shaw for help with this explanation.
Madam Vice Mayor, members of the council, good evening. The Brownsfield program was developed. Brownsfield is typically referred to properties that were formerly industrial or commercial sites where there may be some sort of environmental contamination or a legacy environmental problem. So the Brownfields program is developed to try to assess and evaluate the nature of that contamination, or to give the property a clean bill of health, and then hopefully put the properties back into productive use or revitalize the properties. So the city staff applied for and received an assessment grant. So what we would do would be to work with property owners to first do a historic review of the property, to evaluate whether a problem might exist there, and then potentially to do physical testing on the property for contaminations, and then ultimately develop plans for revitalization. The focus of the Brownfield Assessment Grant is the downtown and the East Main Street corridor. This is a 100% federally funded grant with no match required on the part of the city, and the grant duration is a period of 3 years.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Any questions from Mr. Shaw? Okay, is there a motion to introduce an ordinance appropriating the Brownsville grant from the EPA in the amount of $300,000 to the CIP Fund?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Allen. Any discussion?
I just want to thank staff for pursuing this and all the hard work on Brownsville project, so it's much appreciated.
You're welcome.
Okay, this item will be considered at the April 26th meeting. Item 15 is communications, correspondence, and calendar. Mr. Ham.
The only item I have this evening is I would like, on behalf of the city, to acknowledge Mr. Stam, who's principal here at Waynesboro High School, Dr. Castle, Mr. Stam's staff, supporting staff in the control booth for their assistance in helping us conduct the meeting. It's pretty important and valuable to us, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ham. Item 16 is our citizen comment period. This is a chance for council to hear your comments. We will not respond to your questions at this time. You will have 4 minutes time limit, and please remember to state your name and address for the record. Mr. Ham, do we have anyone signed up?
Yes, we do. Jalecia A. Ward.
Okay, all right. Okay, we're gonna get started, sorry. I'm here, my name is Jalecia Ward. Am I too close? Okay. My name is Jalecia Ward. I'm an activist and advocate, and I am running. Yeah, of course. I am 6695 St. Paul's Road. I am from King George, Virginia.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. But I am running for Virginia House of Delegates in District 99. And I'm here as an advocate with the family of T.Y. Gregory. His father just stepped out, so he should be back, which is why I asked everyone to wait. But we'll just go ahead and get started. T.Y. Gregory was a 24-year-old African-American male. Sorry guys, I've had a long day. He actually had his entire left eye removed from the UVA Medical Center, and he is currently being held in jail after experiencing severe injuries by the Skyline Drug Task Force on January 19, 2021, right here in Waynesboro, Virginia. So this incident is according to eyewitnesses that were physically on the scene and has submitted notarized written testimonies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read an actual testimony from one of the witnesses that were there on the scene that day, and I am accompanied by his mother, and this is T.Y.'s father coming up, so I'll let him come and accompany us. Okay, so he said, "Hi, my name is Brandon Jackson. I'm a written statement for the incident that happened on January 19, 21 with T.Y. Pertel Gregory. That night, I was going to check my mail for the day. I opened my door and saw a red SUV that Mr. Gregory was driving. Stopped at a stop sign across the street from my house. When Mr. Gregory was stopped at the stop sign in a red Honda SUV, I also had seen a black pickup truck behind him. When Mr. Gregory had the right of way, he started to pull off at the stop sign. Halfway through the intersection, the black pickup truck turned on police lights and tried to make the initial stop. Mr. Gregory was in the middle of the intersection when I saw a dark-colored pickup truck slam into Mr. Gregory, which caused Mr. Gregory to wreck into an SUV, which was occupied by a family and with children in it. At this time, I see multiple U.S. Marshals and task force agents swarming Mr. Gregory's wrecked vehicle. They violently slammed Mr. Gregory on the ground. From where I was standing, I could see Mr. Gregory was clearly unconscious from the way he was sitting in the car, and they finally pulled him out the car. His body appeared to me as lifeless when they pulled him out of the car. As soon as the officers proceeded to pull Mr. Gregory out of the car, they slammed Mr. Gregory's unconscious body on the ground. It appeared to me that one officer was laying on top of Mr. Gregory, putting handcuffs on an unconscious Mr. Gregory. In my opinion, not giving the proper medical attention he needed at the time. The police were yelling, "Stay with us, T.Y., talk to me." So to me, that made it seem like he was not breathing. I had told an officer I seen why Mr. Gregory was originally crashed, and they proceeded to move the police truck that had hit him at the scene. At this time, Mr. Gregory is still on the ground unconscious and bleeding on the ground with his pants down to his ankles. I asked the police when the ambulance was coming, and right after, Mr. Gregory took a deep breath, inhaling, and told the police he couldn't see anything. Before this moment happened, I thought Mr. Gregory was dead. After he had told police he couldn't see, the police picked him up, while still handcuffed and excessively bleeding, assisting him to walk in an unmarked police car. This is what I witnessed that night. So what I read to you was the exact testimony from a witness. We have several here that night submitted to me by this family's legal attorney. His family is asking for justice as he is facing 6 charges for a false photo of a gun. I'm going to actually show you a picture of the photo. False photo of a gun that is not his, a false photo of money and pills that is not his, a false photo of all of them in a car mat that is not his. He was actually driving his girlfriend's car that night. And this entire, I do have an entire team that's working with me. It is behind me in this family 100%. What I'm doing here tonight is I'm playing just middle person as a negotiator as far as coming in and letting you know that this incident did happen in Waynesboro, that a lot of people are really concerned, a lot of people in the Black and minority communities, a lot of activists.
I'm sorry your time is up, if you could just finalize your
I will
comments.
definitely wrap it up. What I'm just basically trying to say is I'm just trying to give you guys the opportunity to bless this family with some sort of justice as far as whether it's an investigation, just looking into it, communicating with this family, just helping them in any type of way as far as justice just comes in many formats. Okay? Yes, thank you. Thank you guys.
Anyone else?
Jackson.
My name is Andrea Jackson. I'm Ward A. And I just had two things. I just only had one thing, but I did want to say and finish up my comments from the other public announcement. And just say for people in general, elections have consequences, and I don't think that the next time will go well, because I know the history of Waynesboro and how, people are, people don't like their taxes to be raised. But what I am saying is that, I'm an active person in the community, and I remember things. And so I would implore the people, the city council people, to think long and hard about the decisions that are made and how this will affect the community and how this may or may not affect the budget next year. Because if we don't have the money to do the things that we need to do to make the city prosper, please believe that I will be here front and center to remind you that y'all make decisions and y'all put the city in a position that we can't move forward. A lot of these people who are against, raising the taxes, they one and done. I'm here all the time, every city council meeting, and I'm not afraid to stand up and say how I feel about this community, because I love this community, and I put blood, sweat, and tears in the community. And the thing is that the city council needs to do their job and take care of the city and make sure that it has the ability to be the prosperous and, just good community that it can be. And we can't do that without money. We can't do things. We can't do programs. We can't help people. We can't get good teachers. We can't have even the youth corps. There's different things that we used to do if we don't have money. So just on that. But on a bigger note, I just wanted to say that I wanted to thank Lana Williams and Terry Short for coming back and talking to us, for organizing about the Middle River expansion and what we can do further on that, and being good stewards of the city's money and trying to invest and make things better and trying to figure out how we can get that situation straight and working together as the city council and the community and having those relationships is good. I look forward to, City Councilman Bruce Allen, you having a meeting with us, and I hear that it's in the work. And also I look forward to, the mayor having a meeting and a dialogue with us as well. And Dr. Hostetter met with us, you know what I mean? But we want to keep that open dialogue and work forward, because like you said, the city council, they can't do their job if they don't have community activists or the community willing to step up and do their job as well. So I just want to thank y'all for giving us the opportunity to say our piece and, having, so we can learn from each other and even move forward to yes, we advocated for our city. Now maybe we need to advocate for our state and to be in how we can do that all together and make the community better. Because at the end of the day, I think regardless if we may have different opinions, we all want the community to be better.
Thank you so much. Do we have any others? Okay. Item 17 is a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Allen. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.